Today I'm going to give you a bit of a case study of one of those platforms for a company called PEI Media. So I'm going to tell the story of how we came to be working with them, have a look at some of the technical output from that program, but also some of the operational output. So how do we actually go ahead delivering a project like this? We'll touch on some results, and I'd welcome questions throughout. So in the main hall, I think there's no questions. Here, there's definitely questions. So put your hand up, shout out. And the slides will be available at the end as well. So like any story, this one starts once upon a time. And for this story, imagine the city of London, the financial heart of the UK. Glass and steel everywhere. And I'm meeting a guy called Tony for the first time. He's a new member of the team, and I understand his remit is to come and do some digital work for the business. So I understand this meeting is important. You know, there could be some work out of it for us, so it's important that we come across well. And so here we are meeting each other for the first time and introducing what we do, what he's coming to do. And over that first hour, it plays out that actually we see things from a pretty similar perspective. So PEI is a business that was pretty laden with technical debt. So for example, until reasonably recently, their main content management system to publish anything, any change to any page, required an overnight build of the whole website, thousands of articles. So if you made a spelling mistake as an editor, you had to wait overnight to get that fixed. So we both understood that there was this need to do a remediation program. We needed to get them off bad tech and onto good tech as soon as possible. So before I tell the story some more, I'm going to zoom out and give you a bit of an introduction to PEI Media. So they're an international financial media group. They cover alternative asset classes within the private equity industry. And they do that with a portfolio of brands. So each brand will cover something like energy or infrastructure or sort of an asset class within private equity. And their customers are individuals and organizations that operate within the private equity market. So those brands are kind of manifested through both digital and physical products. So typically there'll be like a hard copy magazine that goes out. There'll be digital, so websites and premium content newsletters. There'll be a range of kind of on and offline research and analytics data. So it could be like a data feed, it could be like a research book, and often the brands will have an event, so they're like market-leading events as well. So they'll have like an infrastructure event in Germany that everyone that's involved with private equity for infrastructure will come along to. So Tony had come on board with a kind of clear remit to do a program of work. And the first thing to note is that this is more than a digital project. This is a digital transformation. So his remit is to transform the PEI Media business. And that involves changing the organization. It involves people as well as tech. Why now? Why was Tony flown in? PEI had gone through an investment process, so they'd received a round of investment. And the investors saw the same thing as the PEI management team, which was that despite the fact they were growing year on year and performing really well, they could do that faster. So there was more growth potential within the business, and they were already doing a great job. So Tony's job was to come in and A, not mess up the already successful business, and B, drive business growth to reward that investment. Now remember that these are some of the wealthiest people and organizations in the world. So they are going to expect quality. The products that PEI produces, they have to stand up on the stage next to competitors, but also next to the sort of experiences that those people will be having with other brands for other purposes throughout their lives. And it has to be a smart synthesis. So they're writing editorial stories, but that needs to be backed up by hard research and analytics data. And it needs to like market their events, but also host advertising. So it has to be like a nice, neat, kind of mutually supportive synthesis of all these things. So if you're writing about a fund that's received investment from this other organisation, then you should be able to show the fund's growth over time as a graph and produce that sort of background data. So these are like, a lot of the time, these are research analysts using these products. And finally, it's this, that we kind of, this modern, flexible tech platform. And by the time we kind of finished those first coffees, we realized that we saw enterprise tech from the same experiences. So we've both seen examples where enterprise technology doesn't have to be a big monolithic platform like Salesforce or Adobe. Rather, it could be a connected architecture of best-in-breed components, kind of designed and implemented through agile practices. So understanding the business requirements, going out, identifying a suitable supplier or platform or product or service, and connecting all those services together to meet the business's needs. And that's the vision that Tony had for this program. And obviously that suited us down to the ground as well, because WordPress is not a big monolithic enterprise piece of software. More than just this though, we both kind of understood how exciting this opportunity was to go into a business that's doing really well and have the opportunity and the remit from like senior board level to go and do a digital transformation piece. So, like, it doesn't get better than that for an agency. But we also understood what was ahead of us, how difficult it would be to bring digital transformation to a business that was sort of laden down with these sort of historic decisions. So we finished our coffee, we've looked each other in the eye, and we like what we see. What next? How do we get from here to working together to deliver this program? A lot of it was process. So when a company receives investment, they're spending that investment money. There's got to be careful, diligent, due sort of process. So documentation, reviews of sort of lots of different options for solving like a content management system or an e-commerce platform. So you have to go through like an RFP process and be able to stand up there, which is something that I think we would have found hard as a business when we were a bit smaller. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of like digging down underneath those initial conversations and finding out, you know, throwing ideas around, is this going to work, is it not going to work, and just understanding each other. We got enough traction with those conversations to win an initial discovery process, so a few weeks of work, engaging with stakeholders through meetings, you know, post-it notes, town halls, all this stuff, and basically tried to create a product backlog that had all of the different stakeholders' requirements in their own language so that they could feel that sort of assurance that what they wanted out of this program had been captured and was going to get factored in, because, you know, these people have, you know, they've got sort of business units within the overall business to run. They've never really had a chance to help shape the digital strategy before. So this is like quite a big important moment and needed to be handled carefully. And we also spent quite a lot of time in the pub drinking and seeing if we could get to know each other, and some of the most interesting ideas fell out of that. So we had already been working with PEI Media. There was a lady called Amanda who had a vision for there to be sort of smaller, more niche brands, you know, different markets within private equity emerge, and so they wanted to be able to tackle some of those. And so she had a vision for doing that, but she knew that trying to do it with this previous platform would be sort of prohibitively A, expensive, and B, painful. So she looked around for CMS, found WordPress, looked around for an agency, found us, asked us if we could build like a lightweight version of their main site. So these are like premium content sites. You have to hit a paywall or a registration wall and you get access to more content. And that included e-commerce. So we had managed to build that platform out in WordPress. You know, we had a kind of a very economic but very effective way of standing up these sort of micro trial brands for PI as a business. And so PI were kind of comfortable with WordPress. They could see where it was good against their incumbent technology. They preferred the editor, but we hadn't managed to get enough traction with the client to win the whole portfolio. So they've got like 6 or 7 main brands, and we're just playing around with sort of 2, 3, 4 little niche ones. And I had definitely tried over a few years to try and build the business case, you know, come on, throw that thing away, let's build it all in WordPress, let's put some proper money into it. But it didn't happen. So to make sure that we were moving forward effectively, we had to be sure about where we were going to and try to create that vision that reflects all of the stakeholders' requirements, all of the benefits from all of the different sort of technology partners. How do we deliver this sort of agile first digital program into a business where, you know, they haven't made a great tech decision for years and years? How do we make all that work? So we had to paint a bit of a vision. Here's where we're going to get to. Here's how it's going to help your business. Here's how it's going to help you do your job specifically. Which is interesting. Not really what digital agencies do quite a lot. Not what I'd done anyway. And we could do the job. We're a big enough team. We could take this project on. It was going to be a lot of work. Probably sort of 4, 5, 6 people working in a team for months and months to get it done. So if you're a like super small business, it's hard to stand that resource up, have that expertise. And yeah, I guess we were also ready to do this. You know, we'd had a bit of a chance to prepare, but we knew it was a good opportunity when it came up, and we threw some resource straight at it. We weren't going to hang around. Some people didn't even reply to the RFP process. You know, so we were keen for it. So as I said, the business already knew WordPress, and so we made it quite easily into this sort of round of request for proposals, RFP. So it's basically, I don't know if many people here have like either drafted one or created one. It tends to be a very long Word document with lots of high-level requirements in, and you then get to respond, and the business will score that. So if they're looking for a CMS, they'll send it out to 5 different providers, score the responses back, and that's like a standard procurement process for big business. So why did WordPress win? And in fact, why did WooCommerce win? So first of all, it's web publishing. If WordPress doesn't stand a good chance for a web publishing RFP, then what's it good for? Even the more detailed requirements around editorial workflows and integrations, WordPress stood up really well against proprietary CMSs. You know, WordPress is a good product, especially with some of the sort of common and well-rounded plugins that are out there. It actually adds up to a really solid solution, even against sort of very expensive off-the-shelf proprietary platforms. A really important part of the requirements was flexibility, so like modularity, being able to stand up different flexible pages without needing to call on developers for support. And they loved Visual Composer the first time we showed it to them. They were like, yep, that's it, done. So that combined with our ability to go out to third-party theme marketplaces and iterate rapidly through a number of different themes to find one that fit their vision for how they wanted these websites to look, to come across, basically gave the business a lot of confidence right from early on that WordPress was going to do this job for them. And that kind of being able to stand up a prototype quickly and show the business how it looks is super important. Say what you will around third-party themes. It's an asset. So how about WooCommerce? So first, it's a good, solid e-commerce platform. I think they had 9 steps in their previous e-commerce journey. So we got it down to like 2 or 3 with WooCommerce. So even at the basics, it was a vast improvement. Saved them a lot of manual effort from the sales team, and it was just going to give them a better conversion rate anyway. As soon as you knock 6 steps out of a checkout, you're going to get more conversions. Simple stuff, but don't underestimate how bad a lot of enterprise software is. Products are content too, and if you've already got a team that's used to editing and producing content within WordPress, then why not extend that out to product descriptions, product images? So it just made sense to have all of the content management, including the commercial content, under one roof. Repay that investment they'd spent in learning WordPress. And as Todd said, WooCommerce is all about open commerce. So it's about being able to sell whatever you want. And one of the things that for us distinguishes what is an enterprise use of e-commerce. It's where you've got lots of different product types. So you've got different business units. They've all got their own P&Ls, their own revenues. So here we had to have physical products being sold. We had to have virtual products like content access or event tickets, a whole bunch of different stuff. So there had to be a platform that could connect all of those different products with the people that wanted to buy them. Some of them are recurring, some of them are one-off, etc. And it also fits with this idea of microservice driven connected architecture as well. You know, WooCommerce is highly connectable, and we could extend it out to integrate with whichever platforms we wanted to. So that's how it came to be that we were working with PEI, why they went with WordPress, why they went with WooCommerce. So what I'm going to do now is show you kind of technically what we've done, or a lot of what we've done. And I think basically we've ended up with enterprise enhanced WordPress. So it's got WordPress and WooCommerce in the middle, but it's got all this other stuff going on too. Why? Because WordPress and WooCommerce aren't great at everything. I know that's maybe a controversial thing to say, but we've struggled with it previously. So for example, if you've got loads of logged in users all trying to access content and you're asking PHP to do a lot of stuff, it's hard to keep performance really high without having like really heavy costs, either in terms of performance engineering or just like bare metal server resources. We've struggled to make cross-website identity management really slick and effective. Even with multi-site, it's a bit clunky and it's a bit weird. Are you registered? Are you not? Do you have a profile or not? And that combined with this sort of need for sophisticated entitlement management meant that we couldn't just use WordPress. So entitlements are like, imagine that you're PEI, you've got anonymous users, you've got registered users for free, you've got premium content sort of paying users. So like an anonymous user can see 1 article, registered but a free user can see 3 in any given calendar month, and then premium content can access everything. Key to their business was maximizing the conversion rate, so registered to paid. And to do that, you have to have a very sophisticated set of tools to analyze and manage entitlement. So with WordPress, we'd managed to get it to that point. You know, here's 1 free article, here's 3 free articles. But changing entitlements for like different parts of different pages and putting that in some sort of algorithm where you get much slicker about it would have been building an application within WordPress, whereas there are cloud platforms that do this. So what we did was keep the bits of WordPress that we wanted and enhance where it wasn't up to scratch. So just as a sort of a quick recap of the client's brief, they've got a multi-brand portfolio of digital properties. They want some specialist business intelligence out of the back of it. They've got to have great-looking premium products. They've got to have a self-service, high-performing checkout and account management function. And they want best-of-breed editorial tools so they can create these premium products in the first place. So here we are, the WordPress bit. This is the basics. This is what every WordPress site does. You've got a content management system, you create a page, you publish it, you've got a web page. Now, for small businesses, WordPress kind of does all three of these things. You often have data in there, like e-commerce order data, you've got a content management system, and the theme is putting out a front end. When it comes to enterprise design, architectural design, digital platforms, actually we find it really helpful to split it into these three different layers. So you've got data platforms that would be like CRM or finance, stuff that you don't want to change very often, if ever, the raw data that belongs to your business. Then you've got the experiences at the other end, the ways that you connect with your human and machine customers. So they could be web pages, APIs, anything that is sort of actually consumed by a customer. And in the middle, you've got architecture, which is the bit that connects the two together, means that you can expose the right data at the right time to the right people to drive data back from an experience into your records. So that's why I've divided these out here. Hopefully it will start to make sense. So I've deliberately called WordPress the CMS here because we're going to separate out those concerns. We're just going to look at WordPress as CMS, and the front-end web page, although it is being served by a theme, is actually now in a different layer. And even this was a win, to go back to this point that don't underestimate how good a product WordPress is. Even having a content management system where you could create a page and easily publish it and it looked good is quite a far cry from a lot of enterprise platforms. So we're winning already, which is how I like things to be. So then let's add WooCommerce, right? Still pretty simple. You can still publish a product and it looks good and it comes out of the website, and you've got a front end for your e-commerce. But now we're going to do something crazy. We're going to add in this system called Blaze, this identity and access entitlement management platform. And it's kind of interesting and important, so I'm going to spend a bit more time on this than some of the other stuff. So Blaze does this thing of managing entitlement. So you define your users, you define your types of content, and then it's got like a matrix that allows you to describe who can do what, where with your content. And the implementation is really clever as well. So there are different ways of doing it. The route that we went down was that you basically put a proxy server in front of WordPress, and everyone accesses the WordPress site through the proxy server. The proxy server handles all identity management. So it handles registrations, sign in, my account, everything. But it also does something super clever, which is that it swaps out parts of the web page on the fly, depending on what user is accessing it and what entitlements they've got. So does that kind of make sense? Yeah, so like if you're registering with the proxy server. WordPress is basically just serving an article page out, like totally dumb, and the proxy server then works out what the content is, what the user is, and manipulates the page that the end user actually gets as a result. So kind of cool, I think. And it lets us do things like this. So you've seen your first article, you click through to a related article, and suddenly you've got a registration wall. WordPress is just 2 articles, no settings, anything like that. We're just pumping out these, as soon as an editor can write it and publish it, it will go out and get cached by the proxy server. So the proxy server takes like all the load. All WordPress is doing really is just supporting the editorial users and outputting a static page. So it's extremely cacheable content.
That's in the main room.
And WordPress's concern is just outputting that content. Blaze then does the swap outs of the different components. So here you can see that we've taken the main content out and swapped it with like a registration CTA, so you can join or sign in. It also lets you do some stuff that WordPress would take a lot of engineering to do. So in this case, the business chose to go with passwordless authentication. So if you've used Slack and you've got a magic link, it's that. So instead of putting in a username and a password, you put in your email address, they email you a magic link, you click the magic link, you sign in. Now, A, that's pretty cool, and it's I think, a good experience, but B, it's got some really interesting implications for premium content businesses as well. So if you're in an organisation, I'd imagine that some organisations might just buy one license and share that sort of email address and password around the building, save themselves some subscriptions. Where you've got access to the content being tied to the device that the user's using to access the content, actually the barrier to entry is really high. Like, what are you going to do? Get the one guy that's got that email account to go around and log into everyone's computers so that they can click the magic. Like, it cuts out a lot of sort of IP bypassing stuff. So, yeah, and again, building like a magic link login system into WordPress would be some pretty heavy engineering. So, sorry, it's 2 clicks. So, one of the examples of how this plays out is that we consider search engine results as an experience, right? So that's one of the ways that people connect with your content is how it looks in Google. And so, if any of you have worked with paid media before, paid content, you'll know that Google's got like a policy where if you want to rank, then you have to give the user the first article free. If it's listed in Google, that user must be able to access that content. So it's called like the first click free rule. And Blaze manages that entitlement. So it looks at the referrer of the traffic, like the source, and if it matches Google or a search engine that matters for first click free, then it will give you that page. If not, it won't. And obviously then we go to the search results for the wrong page. So the sites are ranking better, we're getting more traffic. Okay, so we're here. Next, we are going to add this idea of research and analytics data. So how do we produce these like enhanced articles? So it's not just somebody writing, putting a picture and a pull quote, it's actually rich data that can be mined and explored further. So, like this, PI have a research and analytics database. They've got researchers who are constantly updating it, working with the editorial team, which funds are open, which are closing, how much is there, who's invested in what, who's joined this company from that one. All that's like rich data that helps analysts work out where to put money. So previously this was all kind of like super embedded with this gnarly monolithic grim CMS platform. We needed to find a way to access that data and display it within WordPress. And the way that we did that was pipe it through Elasticsearch and then build a React front-end app that's embedded with the WordPress site. So it pulls all that data through React, it's interrogable, filterable, does all this stuff, lots of different layouts. But it means that we can now have like an editorial story and embed like data-driven graphics and tables. So it's like a slick premium product. It all looks like it's come out of the same place. It's not like copied and pasted from Excel or something like that. It's all like pretty nice. And of course, Blaze can also put some entitlement rules around this. So, you know, there's a super premium level where you get to access all the data you want as well as all the content you want. So, this does create a bit of an issue, right? So if we've got all the identity stuff happening in Blaze, but we've got WooCommerce that's going to transact on baskets and checkouts, how does that work? Because, you know, with WooCommerce, you kind of like, you create an account within WordPress and you put in your details and you've got like a profile there. With this paradigm, you don't. WordPress doesn't know who you are and it doesn't care. So how do we fix that? How do we close that gap? Well, Blaze also connects out to the CRM, pulls data through to manage entitlements, and so we can still create like this this checkout experience where, as long as you're signed in, if you're trying to check out, then your user data is all inserted for you. And I'll look at exactly how we do that in a minute. But it works really well, and it lets customers use their entitlements straight away. So as soon as they've completed a WooCommerce checkout, it calls, updates Blaze with the new entitlement, and the user can like access the content straight away. There's no like, please wait 24 hours. There's no calling customer services. Everything just works. It's slick. So PEI's sales, customer support teams have a lot less work to do now because people can transact easily with a streamlined checkout, get their entitlements straight away. Everyone's just happy because everything just works. And again, this is not necessarily common with platforms. So I'm going to come back to how does that data get into WooCommerce, but I'm also going to talk about analytics because the two are kind of easiest understood together. Sorry, this click is a bit funny. So we're now going to add in Google Tag Manager, which is going to pass data back to analytics and from there into business intelligence platforms as well. So if you haven't come across Google Tag Manager, it's a way of, like, at a very simple way, it's a simple description is it's like Google Analytics, but maxed. So you can pass it much richer data sets back, and you can pass it to multiple different places like Crazy Egg or a number of different platforms at once, but it's one data layer that describes everything that's going on that page. So here's how the checkout and the data layer stuff works. So color-coded blue, that's provided by WordPress. It provides a page on a site and it says, you know, you're on this site, here's the page, published at this time, whatever. Then we've got purple, which is WooCommerce. It provides the checkout form that houses the fields that we need to get filled out. And then the orange is from Blaze. So because Blaze is sitting in front of WordPress, we can interrogate Blaze's data layer, pull out the personal information, and overlay it into the checkout field. So for a user, they're like, I'm signed in, it knows who I am, of course it does, I'm going to go and check out. All just feels supernatural, but behind the scenes there's this like much richer activity happening. So we've got user information from a user API, we've got content information from a content API, all going back into a like enterprise-grade analytics and business intelligence. So there we are. That's as much of the architecture that I feel brave enough to run through, apart from noting that there's like this email marketing thing. So obviously when we conduct a transaction in WooCommerce, it has to update Blaze, which updates CRM, but also the email engine to send out emails to that user. So like, it all looks a bit spaghetti. But there is something that this kind of architecture lets us do, which is really interesting and important. And it's this idea of personalization. So for a business like PEI, the more pages somebody looks at, the more A, they're enjoying their subscription, or B, they're going to hit a registration or paywall and do a transaction with the business, right? So it's really important that if they've read one article, we get them to read 2, 3, 4, as many as we can. So related articles take on a different layer of importance than sort of a standard WordPress site where it's like, you know, oh, these are the latest 3 in the same category. And the way that this works is that all of the WordPress content also goes into Elasticsearch. So we've got content as an API from Elasticsearch, and we've got user information, identity management, profiling, what stories have they looked at, what do they like, which events have they been to, from Blaze's user API. And so then, again, build out a nice little React web app that sits on the page, mashes up the content API with the user API, and you can tweak the rule set around that. So if somebody's looked at a story before, then don't show it to them. If you've got a promotional story about an event that's coming up that you think they might like, put that one in. So we can get far, far slicker about how we're targeting people, how we're getting them to transact. And that's only possible through having this sort of connected microservices-driven architecture, or hoping that the monolithic platform that you've signed up for will release this feature at some point and that it'll actually work, which is not necessarily true. Cool. Did all that kind of make sense? Any questions on the architecture? Right, so the question is, are we running multi-site and are we cross-promoting articles from different sites? We are running multi-site for the WordPress, but currently the sites are siloed content-wise, so we're not pulling content, but we could, because once it's in Elasticsearch, you can pull anything anywhere. Thanks. Yep. Cool, thanks. So the question is how we technically serve in the front end. It's basically an enhanced theme output. So the theme provides the basic page, it goes through Blaze, there's a couple of web apps. So you think of it as like a progressively enhanced normal output from a theme. So whereas a dumb theme, you just have the article content, with it going through Blaze and having these sort of web apps that are enabled and connecting and doing clever stuff, it's like that web page, but enhanced on steroids. But we could equally just build it out as like a, an entirely React-based front end or anything. The whole idea is to kind of separate the concern out so that if we ever wanted to run WordPress as a headless CMS, or in fact, in due course, even swap WordPress out if the business wanted to, then we could do that. So they're all kind of separate parts of the pie. Did that kind of answer the question? Yeah, cool. Remember that with this program, it's a lot about remediation. So they've got some awful stuff happening. So we need to get them onto a new platform where we can iterate and we can add features and value and solve some of these problems as quickly as possible. So, yeah. Hey.
As you're helping find these solutions for these companies and kind of setting up these different systems, what challenges? I know you talked kind of about it with the map earlier on, but how do you address the challenges of helping their team take over the responsibilities of managing parts of it, or do you just kind of maintain that on your end?
Cool. So the question was, how do we work with the client to help them fulfill their kind of business objectives in terms of choosing tech platforms, suppliers, that sort of thing?
Or just the managing the content and continuing to provide that. Like, do you guys maintain that on your end, or do you set them up in a way that they can, like, that they can have a new employee come in and manage parts of that?
Yeah, everything's about training and, sorry, so the question was, do we play like an active ongoing management role with the platform, or do we just give it over to the client? And it's the latter. So for us, there's no value in kind of doing anything that it doesn't require our expertise. So empowering the client is kind of a key part of that. I'm also going to talk about some of this stuff with the operational part next, which is, so it's a great question to segue into it. Anything else on the architecture spaghetti before we move on? Cool. So we've done a few different platform design and builds like this, microservices all connected into a different architecture. And they're really interesting technically, but operationally, how do you go about doing this, designing it, working with a client? And for me, it's actually just as important as the technical delivery. It's like, how do you work to make sure that the solution is going to be right for the client, they enjoy the process, that everyone is sort of creating value. So right from the outset, we had a remit to do this sort of with an agile delivery way for an agency. That's kind of cool. Like most WordPress agencies, it's projects. It falls into waterfall because you've got fixed requirements and a fixed budget, and so you can call it what you like, but it's Wagile at best and probably just waterfall. This is a product, right? It's a product that we're going to build, and it's their product as a business over a long time scale. So we had the opportunity to build out like a nice product backlog and to run against that with a Scrum team on like 2 weekly increments and delivering stuff back to the business every 2 weeks. Like, great opportunity, really exciting, massively difficult to convince senior stakeholders in the business that there are no fixed requirements or fixed budgets or fixed timelines. It's, we're all going to do our best to build this thing in the best way through collaboration. That's a pretty tough sell when you're talking money and stakeholders who may not have even heard of agile methodology before. Like, what do you mean there's no fixed budget or fixed timeline for this? Those are kind of awkward conversations to have. So yeah, I mean, the most important thing is to deliver, to give the business something back out of that process, so they start getting it and they start seeing the value. But inevitably, almost always, there's some sort of compromise. So we'll do 3 sprints and we'll definitely agree that these things are here, or you can put some commercial performance wrappers around it. But getting an agile sort of team off the ground and working with the client and having the client really happy about that is interesting part of the process. So we won enough trust through those kind of conversations and workshops to win this sort of calibration phase. We did a lot of internal stakeholder workshops, making sure everything was written up in their language. A lot of meetings with tech partners to make sure that we weren't blocked, that we had these integrations nailed. We all understood what we'll be releasing to the program at what point. You know, were we all going to be one Scrum team? Were we going to be like Scrum of Scrums? Like, how does it all work? And then playing that back to the business in a way that they understood. So people that are running an events business don't necessarily understand like digital terminology for something. They know what they want out of the business. So you end up with this like quite weird product backlog that's written in business language and is inconsistent because it has the views from multiple different stakeholders, but together that has to be synthesized into a vision that everyone can share and go, yes, if it does that, I can see how this will be a good thing for me and for the business. And really it's just time. You have to take those requirements, you have to be gentle. You know, you don't listen to somebody and then write it in your own language, because when you play it back to them, they won't understand what it is. So you have to kind of compromise between like a purely digital take on stuff and a purely business take on it. And that's just time understanding what they do and don't want, careful writing up of requirements, careful prioritization, understanding what's like a functional requirement or a non-functional requirement, or which component does this relate to, what are the dependencies. Like building out that initial backlog is hire a business analyst would be my recommendation. And of course, as a digital transformation piece, this is not just about building some tech, it's about how do we build capability into the business to be able to define what they need, assess what is and is not a good fit against that, and prioritize that work against all the other stuff that they have to do, all the other things they could spend their money on. So we took it from, and I hasten to add, this is not all just, you know, pragmatic went in and did this, you know, but we're part of this process, so we have to help them understand what skills we'd like to see from them. So in this case, it was like an agile business analyst who could write up, break down these requirements into nice stories with acceptance criteria and technical dependencies, and a Scrum Master to help run this big program, right? You know, you've got 2 or 3 different tech partners all doing release critical work together. So they knew they had to get those people in place. We were like privileged to be asked to help vet some of the candidates that came through and like have a chemistry test. You know, it's lovely to get asked by a client to help them with those sort of processes, but bringing in people that could just do it and transfer some of the skills back into the business, even if they're contractors, you know, 6-month contractors, it can really get you off the ground much faster than having to start from scratch and learn everything together. And at the same time, we looked across, PI looked across their business and thought, you know, who's going to be a great fit for this? You know, who could be a subject matter expert on this? Who should own the events product? Who should own the product vision for the whole organization? So they've changed as a business alongside the digital delivery. How to work together is kind of important, right? So defining the boundaries. Technically, we're responsible for that, but you're responsible for that, but actually the two have to happen. So, you know, how does that play out? Sometimes that only comes out of lessons learned, gaps that you recognize as you come to them. Being really clear about tickets, so acceptance criteria. When you're writing up a task, being really clear with both your internal team and the business, like when is this task done? What does done actually look like for this task? It's so important, because actually when you get to that level of saying, you know, it must, you know, we must have a website, you know, we must have a page that's served over HTTPS and contains, you know, so you have to get quite detailed about it to avoid assumptions, and assumptions on a large scale program like this end up causing like massive problems. You get better at estimating and you get better at reporting, and you build that sort of effective way of working so that the business can trust your estimate, you can trust that you've got the backing to go ahead and do this feature or that task. But ultimately it comes down to just actually delivering. You know, if you don't have a team that you're confident of behind you, that it's going to pick up these stories, going to commit to the sprint, and get those points burned, then you're going to struggle. You have to release things back to the business, whether that's waterfall or agile. You just have to give the business results and look for easy wins. So as soon as you've got something you can give back that's tangible, it's new, that a stakeholder can go to the board and say, look, this is what we've achieved in this 6 weeks, in this 2 weeks. Those sort of wins, that narrative is so important within a large organisation. You know, there's going to be people that are more or less sceptical, more or less happy about this program. So like incremental wins every 2 weeks is, you know, it's vital. And because it's like a really long session, I thought I would have a look at one of the things I think is really interesting out of this, which is it's a program status report. Now, I know that might not sound very exciting, but I think it really speaks to how to run a project at this scale. So, I mean, what are we now? I guess 9 months in, and it's a program that could potentially last 2 or 3 years. So how do we report progress about that back to the business in a way that they can actually understand that's meaningful? If you run projects, then you might sometimes find status reports a bit like dull and dreary and hard work, and it's sort of, you know, action this or checklist that. So I'm actually really proud of these status reports. Again, they're not all our own work, but let's have a see what you think. So we invested pretty hard in Jira and Confluence. They're like the Atlassian suite. We use some other bits and pieces as well, but it's kind of like Basecamp or Asana, but enterprise grade for software. So you can extend it in a whole bunch of ways. You can run sprints, you can have boards, you can configure it however you want. And Confluence is like the wiki part of it as well. And they connect in really nice ways. So you can like create a task report in Jira and pull it through to a Confluence page, for example, and it will be kind of interactive. You can click back through to Jira and stuff. So look, here's the report I'm going to run through down on the left-hand side, and it's quite a big report. So I'm going to like just pull a few bits out and talk about them because I think it's just a really nice artifact. So table of contents, what we're talking about, what's the contents, what the time periods, and then this high-level roadmap. So there are several different work streams going on at any one point. There are lots of different projects within that, and there are different milestones within that as well, business milestones. So this is blurry. It's not your jet lag. I did blur it all out because obviously it's like commercially confidential. But this, like imagine you're sitting in a boardroom, you're a C-suite exec, and you want to know what's going on. It's this level of sort of clarity and communication that you'd expect for spending this kind of money. You know, you want to know what's going on, what the heck is happening, where are we with the plan. So if you can give those stakeholders a report like this every 2 weeks that answers those questions, it takes a lot of the tension out of the relationship, and it gives them confidence that what they're seeing is also backed up by like a high level plan. And you just cut down this amount of like chatter and side narrative stuff that can be really difficult to navigate. Here's like just an overall program status. So the questions at the top are like, are we delivering on schedule, on quality? Do we have enough resources? Is it costing the right amount of money? And you have like a status and a trend. So you can be like amber, but it's okay because we're trending green, or you could have like a amber, but we're trending red. And those are different messages. And then obviously, I mean, you can sort of see that the volume of content for amber trending amber means that we need to have some notes around that. But otherwise, the business can crack on. You know, everything's being delivered on time, on budget, to quality. I'm going to skip past that bit. So this is the start of some of the kind of direct from Jira output. So by setting up the sprints properly, having proper estimates and points against tickets, you can just generate, like Jira does this stuff. You know, when you move a ticket to done, then it burns the points. And that kind of grey line in the middle of the left-hand chart, that shows like the model burn rate for a sprint. So we start with like 30 sprints. We want to end up with none that haven't been burned, like tickets closed. And you can see, it's not a great looking one from our performance there, because it's sort of nothing's been done, and it kind of all drops off. Some sprints are like that. You know, you have to get a whole bunch of pre-dependent tasks done, and then suddenly you complete everything on the last couple of days. But it gives you an idea of like, how's this sprint trending? Are we like meeting that idealized line or not? and a lot of the sprints do look healthier than that. Here's some more examples, reports straight out of Jira. Jira's doing all this hard work for you. So like against a release, so we'd have like 4 or 5 different releases of the web platform. So how many of the sprints in that release are done, or how many of the tickets which are in the whole release are done? Have they got estimates? Where are we at a higher level? And there's some interesting stuff here around commercial tracking. So with sprints, we talk about points. So this is a 1-point task or a 5-point task. Obviously, for the business, that equates to money. So how do we track that, a 1-point task still costs the business the same 6 months later? Because we're committing to the same number of points as a team every sprint. As a sort of somebody spending the money, I'd want to know that I'm getting the same value back from that. So this is just sort of a point cost over time sort of exercise, but it's just that kind of allaying the fear that, oh, hang on, I'm sure these guys are getting more expensive or they're getting slower or something. So if you can show that, no, 6 months ago, a point cost this much on average, and today it costs you this much, it lets you spot the trends. Are we underestimating, being too aggressive? Like, is there any funny business going on? And this stuff matters. If you're there day to day in the program, then you kind of know. Your direct stakeholders might know. But when you go like a tier or 2 tiers above them, they don't know you. They don't necessarily care about anything except results. So showing that you're being duly diligent by tracking that kind of commercial granularity buys a lot of trust. I think it's a really interesting model for like agency commercials as well, being really clear about sprint costs. Risk register. Was that 5 minutes, Kat?
We're actually over right now.
Oh, right.
But go ahead.
So yeah, like they're really happy. We've done some sort of introduced Agile into the business. Their editorial teams are actually now happy to come to work and use the systems that they're sort of asked to use. And we are getting there with remediation, so moving all the sites off the old stuff onto the new. And once we're there, then we can actually start looking forward. So like feature development, prioritizing requests from across the business. So really exciting stuff. And yeah, that even just implementing passwordless alone suddenly saw their kind of group subscription inquiries leap significantly. So we've migrated 2 sites onto the new platform. There's 4 in progress in testing, a couple more to go after that. And some like high-level results. So traffic has been up, search engines are happier, sites load faster, people are clicking for all more related articles. So, if you see 27%, not just as traffic increases, but also inquiries, subscriptions, that's like significant business impact. And for the second site, we got the same impact because this site, we'd migrated off like an earlier version of WordPress, that kind of rudimentary one. But when we moved like a site off their legacy platform, we actually saw the increase much bigger, so up 40% compared to just sort of 23. So even with like a basic version of the WordPress stuff we were doing, it was still 20% better than their enterprise software. Yeah, I won't run too far through all these or in too much detail, but like investing in the tools, getting Jira set up right, getting Confluence set up, it's like it takes a lot of work, but once it's done, being able to produce the reports like that, rather than having to bat through like 15 or 20 different emails from different stakeholders asking what's going on or allaying this concern or that one, like it does play out. And that's even before you factor in like how much goodwill, how much faith, how much trust have you built with the business. And PI now use Jira and Confluence for all sorts of stuff. They have their own working groups, they track meeting notes, they take actions. So they've now moved on to these systems as a way of delivering projects internally that had nothing to do with us, nothing to do with the other tech partners. It's just an effective way for them to work. But it's difficult, getting it all set up, getting the business to buy into Agile. They're all kind of things that it's worth investing a bit of time. Spend longer telling the client that Agile is better for this project or not. See if you can get that buy-in. And also, probably some of you are sitting there thinking, off-the-shelf themes, Visual Composer for a project like this, what are you doing? But it worked, it's what the business wanted. They wanted something that was quick, they could see, they understood, they could get that value straight away, and we could get that stuff remediated. You know, maybe we'll build them a custom backend editor, maybe we'll build them a custom React theme at some point. But right now, from a business perspective, getting them off something not so good onto something good, that was what the business wanted, and it's not for us to judge that. As long as we're sure we can support it and get good results, then yeah, anyway, I know somebody will be asking about themes. Cool. So more questions? Please, that's me done now, I promise. Thanks. Any questions? Everyone just want lunch?
In terms of budgeting, after you've got the whole ecosystem created,
Yeah.
what's your rough estimate on a yearly basis? What percentage of that original budget
Sorry, could you repeat that a bit more loudly?
How much of your original platform budget was allocated to ongoing maintenance updates?
Okay, so maintenance costs versus build-out costs. At the moment, is that including hosting? Let's ignore hosting. It's kind of hard to say at the moment because we're building a lot of like bugs or like new small features just into the Scrum team, so they're not really that clearly differentiated, but it should be minimal. I mean, once the code isn't changing, then it's running updates, running some regression tests, making sure everything works again, and then, I mean, our hope is that we'll be continuing to Scrum against new features. So actually, the standalone maintenance costs should be pretty low. Yeah, we don't get many support tickets from them. Hey.
We already did that previously. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we've got our own Scrum Master as well.
Yeah, we're gonna.
So we have Scrum Master and Business Analyst our side. They've got one, and so all the tech partners have that sort of same interface. Like when you listen to a BA talk to a BA, you know that's why you need BAs, and it's the same with Scrum Masters. You know, if they're good, then you have to have the interface like both sides. If you've just got a Scrum Master, all they're going to be doing is like nagging the client, unless they've got somebody that is there to like pick those up, get them done, feedback. You know, so having that interface in terms of people is really important. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How does that go? How do you come out of that conversation winner?
So the question is, how do you sell Agile in? Yeah, it's something we're still learning, but
store was like previously open.
it comes down
before, I just
to
don't know how
building
it
enough
was.
trust and goodwill to buy yourself a little rope, and then not hanging yourself with that rope. You know, if you can show that it works, even if you can do it by stealth, right? Sometimes you. Often with enterprise, right, that your way into working with them is that you do a small discrete project, and actually they realise that you're really good and the product's really good, and there's another opportunity that in a different department they kind of win you in. So even if it's a fixed timeline, fixed requirement, fixed sort of budget project, you can still deliver it agile behind the scenes, and then at the end of it you can go, well, look, you know, actually we did this in 2-week increments. Here's what it looked like. If you ever want to do anything more on this thing, then let's try and stack up 2 weeks worth of features, and then we can get that done in the same way. You have to scrap. But one thing I will say is that I think Agile's definitely going to be increasingly important in Pragmatic's future, and I think digital agencies as a whole, Agile will become more important. So that kind of process of continuously analysing a business, what they need, how you can help them, delivering those results in a sort of trustworthy, collaborative way. I definitely see that as part of the industry's trend. Mm. So the question is, like, what takeaways could we do? How could we sell this in? So Tony was a big fan of Agile already. We didn't have to force them round to that way of thinking. With other clients of a similar sort of scale of program, we are still waterfall, and at the moment we're standing up some Agile stuff behind the scenes, so like super Wagile. But the idea is that in due course we will go to them and we'll say, look, you know, if we'd done this in an Agile way, here's how it would have looked. And don't you think our delivery's been like really solid anyway? How about we try it out? Part of it's about case studies, proof that we can actually do it, which is kind of why I wanted to talk through some of this stuff, right? You know, until we have the opportunity to get up, put together a case study, talk to people about how we work, it's very difficult to sell. You know, it's about trust and working together and having confidence that you can deliver it in that way as well. So yeah, key takeaways: learn more about Agile, softly, go for some small wins, look at the Agile manifesto rather than like Scrum or Kanban, and take some of the sort of principles that underpin all of those different methodologies and try and factor those into your business, because you can still follow the Agile manifesto and do a waterfall project, you know, communication rather than documentation, etc. I don't feel like I've given you a very good answer there, I'm sorry. I don't know, it's super hard. Good luck. Any more? Cool. Thank you all for listening so long.